We're gonna bring back the card ratings with emotes. Emote ratings for those of you guys who need a refresher course. Emote ratings from God, it's been a while since we did these. I couldn't tell you why. Lux is the best card. We've got Darius being the worst. You know, you can see all the scores here basically. But yeah, we're bringing it back. All right, guys. New cards are coming out. Let's check them out. Here we go. Cithria's moving up in the world. All right. Check it out. We've got Ardent Tracker, a 6-mana 3/5 elite scout. When you summon an elite, reduce my cost by 1. And presumably, I mean, that's, you know, when she's in your hand, because it doesn't say anywhere. So it works the same way that, like, Vanguard Squire does, where if she's in your hand, you can reduce her cost by 1. That's definitely a lot scarier than the Vanguard. Then we've got the 10 mana Cithria. Holy shit. Cithria, Lady of Clouds at 10 mana. Here, let me move my head so you guys can see that last card. Cithria, Lady of Clouds, 10 mana 10/10 elite challenger. When I'm summoned, double other allies' power and health and grant them challenger. Whoa. What? She's I mean, for 10 mana, that might be a little expensive, but that's at least, like, really funny. All right, Chirean Sumpworker, 2 mana 1/2, P&Z card in this case, elusive. When you summon another Chirean Sumpworker, obliterate me and transform allied Chirean Sumpworkers everywhere into Sumpworks Posse, sorry. It's Posse's, and this is Sumpworks Posse. Jesus Christ. All right. And Sumpworks Posse is basically, it's the same thing, except it's got 4 attack instead of 2. And when you attack with it, it deals 1 to enemies in the enemy nexus, which is really powerful as an ability, actually. So, if you... Wow, that's pretty strong. Transform allied Chilean Sumpworkers everywhere into Posses. So, when you play a second Sumpworker, it'll turn your first Sumpworker into a Posse, and then if you have like a third Sumpworker to draw later, that'll also be a Posse. Huh. Wow. Yeah, that's really, really difficult. We're gonna have to think about ways to use that, but it's really not that bad. I mean, it starts out with elusive, and of course, you're in P&Z, so you have ways of potentially trying to clone that or draw into it more reliably. It's not a skill even. Yes, this attack command is really powerful. It doesn't go on the stack. It's not a skill, and it's not respondable either. Like, the opponent can still, like, it doesn't resolve at burst speed. Doesn't it resolve at burst speed? It would have to. Yeah, it resolves at burst speed. God, that's like, unless there's like a typo here and they mean for this to be a skill. It is a skill? Oh, okay. Yeah, circuit breaker. So there is a typo, and I guess like they wanted there to be a little circle there. So yeah, it doesn't resolve at burst speed. Adaptation 3000, a tech. Wait, we're getting a tech tag. Wait, the P&Z card, 1 mana 1/3. When you summon a tech, we share keywords. Wow. So I think what that means, so that the tech keyword was in the game. I think Heimer bots are technically techs, but I don't think they have really implemented the tech tag yet. And I'm pretty sure they are going to implement it. What I mean by that specifically is this tech keyword never really did anything. It never really had any payoff. And I think they will go back and retroactively make some cards tech. Right? Like some cards, for example, because all the Heimer turrets are currently tech, but I think they're going to go back and add it to some cards like, you know, for example, like Ballistic Bot. And maybe like Victor. Stuff like that never like cared about having the tech keyword, but it seems pretty bizarre for it to not when they're actually introducing it. Like, tech has never really been a keyword in this game. It's been like an Easter egg, right? You could look at the Heimer bots and you were like, oh, these are tech. That's interesting. What does that mean? But it's never done anything. This is the first time it's actually done anything, and I feel like there's a good chance they're gonna want this to go somewhere. Okay, and Circuit Breaker is just a skill for Sumpworks Posse. Incisive Tactician is an 8 mana 4/5. Reputation I've cost 6, and when I'm summoned, rally. So it's sort of like a Citrus Courier. It's 6 mana 4/5, but instead of plunder, it's like reputation, sort of. That one's probably fairly weak. I don't see a way to use that one. Like, Citrus Courier is already bad. This is like a worse Citrus Courier. And when you play it for 8 mana, it's pretty horrible. Because, like, you know, Tiana Crown Guard is, you know, she's not terrible. Like, she has seen some fringe play, but she hasn't really been great. And Incisive Tactician will be that a lot of time. All right, Thrashing Snapper. 1 mana 2/1 Noxus card. When an enemy blocks me, give me +3/+0 this round. Whoa, and that's another epic too. It's wow, that's actually really cool. So when it gets blocked, it goes to 5 attack, which means it's a reputation support card potentially. You can use Might on it and just go to town, right? It has some real applications. Basically turn 1 reputation activator. Yeah, something like that. It's a very, very interesting card. The biggest problem for Thrashing Snapper is that, Noxus has a lot of very good 1-drops. So it will have to compete with those. But, it's definitely a pretty unique card. It's got a good chance, actually. Better Precious Pet, isn't it? No, in a lot of like aggro decks, you wouldn't run this over Precious Pet. This is really good in a deck that wants to be triggering Reputation, or a deck that is looking for like maybe like comboing with Might or something to be able to get value. The SI card is insane. All right, we're gonna have to go to Mobalytics. I think there's a few more cards as well. All right, what's happening here? They're on Twitter. Oh, dude, there's more. All right, wait. That's not all. There's more. First wave. The wings in the wave. Wait, there's still some of these are face down. Pike? Yeah, there's some Pike cards here. Wait, why are some of these face down? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we've got this 1 mana card from SI, the wings in the wave. Play me as first wave or last wind. So basically, for 1 mana, you can choose whichever one you want. And it'll be either a 1 mana 3/3 to play me, kill an ally, or it'll be 1 mana 0/1 when I'm summoned, summon a prey. That is really powerful. God, they're adding a lot of epics here. A lot of like 1 mana epics too. A lot of like cheap epics. That's really powerful. That's leave it to Shadow Isles to get all the good cards. Good old Shadow Isles, of course. Yeah, the wings in the wave is really good. Like, that's pretty crazy. It's definitely not just, like, when I say it's really good, I'm not just talking about, like, the very current meta with, like, Nasus Thresh, of course. This sort of, like, Shadow Isles concepts have been strong for a while. Like, there's always going to be, you know, like, some kind of, like, Cursed Keeper, Blighted Caretaker deck will always be doing well. Endur never had, like, the play rate that Thresh Nasus had, but Endur has always had the same win rate. Like, literally always. Like, even when you think Endur should be doing poorly, it's doing well. It's really, really funny as a deck. And that's because this archetype of, like, Cursed Keeper, Blighted Caretaker sort of combos is inherently really good. This card is really powerful because the raw flexibility of this is great. Like, you can use it as just, like, a, you know, double summon 2 cheap fodder, or you can use it as last win, which just eats something for free. It's sort of like a worse Ravenous Butcher when this happens, but the flexibility of that is still really, really important. Then we've got Buried in Ice and Succumb to the Cold. Buried in Ice is a Freljord card. Obliterate each enemy to summon a frozen tomb in its place. God, this is so interesting. There's so many cards to talk about today. At slow speed, obliterate each enemy to summon a frozen tomb in its place. It's like Ruination. Ruination? Ruination. It's like Freljord Ruination. Yeah, it's like Freljord Ruination. And of course, it doesn't work on your own units, right? Like, it's like a one-sided Ruination with, of course, the downside of it not lasting more than a turn. So, Buried in Ice is, I think, paradoxically very, 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 very different from Ruination. Like, very different from Ruination. Here's the kicker, guys. Ruination is a card that you want to use when you have an empty board, and when your opponent develops into your empty board, you wipe them. Specifically, Ruination is maybe a little bit better when your board isn't completely empty, but you've got like 1 or 2 chump blockers. Because that way they're more likely to develop, and you can wipe their board and kind of win the game at that point. Buried in Ice is very, very different. Because the enemy is only going to lose their units for 2 turns. Only their attack turn and their defense turn. And then they're going to come back. Which means that with Buried in Ice, you kind of need to have a board, right? Unlike with Ruination. Combo with It That's Theirs. You can combo with It That's Theirs as well. It That's Theirs to just obliterate all the frozen tombs. Wow. That is crazy. That is crazy. Just literally, yeah. Yeah, they develop. I mean, you wouldn't be able to do it on turn 6 and 7 because It That's Theirs is an 8. But you could do it on like 7 and 8, 8 and 9. That's a bit crazy, yeah. I mean, you can definitely punish, like, you can blow out the entire board with that combo. That'll basically always just win the game on the spot when that happens. Buried in Ice is really hard to evaluate. The thing is, without comboing it with anything, you actually kind of need a board for this to really do a ton. For Buried in Ice to really have a strong impact on the game, you kind of need to have a board because you need to basically at least try to end the game before they get their units back. And for that to happen, you kind of need a board. This is so interesting. Even Ash LeBlanc might be able to run a 1-of as a finisher. Like, I can see his card being ran in a few things. And this is so unlike anything we've seen before. It's actually really hard to evaluate. Passage Unearned. You can also combine this with Passage Unearned. You can use Buried in Ice, like a Ruination, and then 2 turns from now, when they all come back from their frozen tombs, you can use Passage Unearned, and their units are all dead, because Frozen Tomb makes them all summoned that turn. That's really funny. That's really funny. So there's Passage Unearned. I think Buried in Ice looks pretty good. Like, this is so hard to evaluate, because it could either be kind of poop or like the strongest thing we've ever seen, but it does look pretty good. Like, Buried in Ice looks like, and it's got good standalone value. It's got decent combo potential. It looks great. I haven't even read this one. Succumb to the Cold. We're not even done yet. Frostbite an enemy, summon a frozen thrall. But why? Is a 4-mana Frostbite? Looks like a 4-mana Frostbite. Alright. So here's the problem with Succumb to the Cold. There's actually, like, and don't get me wrong, there might be some synergy cards we haven't seen, but you have to understand, like, the fundamental problem with Succumb to the Cold. You have to think about, like, the timing of it. So when you look at this card, obviously, it's worse than a Flash Freeze in most situations, because in most situations, a Frozen Thrall does nothing. Now, you might be thinking, well, but what if you're trying to play a Frozen Thrall deck? Then mightn't it have synergy? And it actually, you know, I mean, let's say a Frozen Thrall deck did exist. You wanted to play, like, you know, a deck that was trying to race out the Frozen Thralls. The problem with it there is that you don't want to be using it on, you don't want to Frostbite on the kinds of turns you want to summon a Frozen Thrall, right? Like, think about it. If you want to summon a Frozen Thrall in a Frozen Thrall deck, you don't want to do it on, like, turn 3 or 4, but this card will force you to Frostbite an enemy on turn 3 or 4 for 4 mana, which is almost never good unless they have, like, a Zed or something very specific, right? Like, it's a card that the first half of its ability wants you to play it in a very specific way with a very specific timing. Like, usually you want to be Frostbiting late into the game. This is, like, turn 6 or 7 often. And Frozen Thralls want to be played early, so it's just, like, a very confused card. Alright, and then we get to the Pike cards. Monstrous Harpoon. God, we're getting so much today. Monstrous Harpoon. 6 mana. Deal 5 to a unit at fast speed. And plunder I cost 3 less. That's not bad. That's actually not bad. I mean, we don't have a 6 mana deal 5 at fast speed. It's to a unit, guys. It's like, look at this, like, Grasp. Grasp is like a 5 mana deal 3. And of course it's a drain, and of course the drain matters. So the one thing about Monster Harpoon that's interesting is, like, I'm not 100% sure if, like, it's a Bilgewater card, which is bizarre. I don't know if Bilgewater decks want this kind of thing. So it might be awkward based on that, maybe. But, I mean, this card is pretty good. Like, being able to damage any unit at fast speed is a really powerful thing. And you're often not going to need to use this for the plunder to be able to actually get value out of it, right? Like if you plunder this and it's a cost 3, deal 5, then of course it's completely insane. You're not going to plunder this in most cases, but it's still 6 mana fast speed, deal 5 to a unit is solid. There's nothing wrong with that. If Pyke has a kill payoff, this might just be good. Pyke's payoff might be killing champions specifically, which might be why this deals 5. Like, this card looks good. It really does. Again, we have no idea if this will make it into a deck, because we don't know if Bilgewater will support this kind of playstyle, but, I mean, it looks very promising. Bone Skewer, 2 mana fast, an ally strikes an enemy, then moves to the top of your deck. Whoa. An ally strikes an enemy, then moves to the top of your deck. Wow. That's really interesting. I think this card is probably pretty good, but it needs to be used on a very specific kind of ally. Well, we got to think of combos for this, guys. So, I mean, it's a one-way strike. This card is really powerful. It's like a single combat that your unit doesn't take damage, and you can potentially gain somewhat of a bonus of replaying things. Although, in theory, a lot of times you don't want that bonus. Use this in deep. Bone Skewer is a really scary card for deep. A really, really scary card for deep decks, right? Like, keep in mind, deep has, I think, kind of always been needing a card like this, right? Like, Bone Skewer has really wanted this idea of, like, deep has wanted a card that can actually interact and disrupt the opponent's board. And with deep, you can, you have big units. It's kind of like, you're in Demacia. It's like single combat. Your strikes will be big and will remove big things at speed. Bone Skewer, you can, like, remove an attacker while phantom blocking too. Yeah, it's kind of like a Noxian Fervor. You can use an attacker while phantom blocking too. And if you have, like, a Nautilus on the board or a Devourer of the Depths, like, sending it to the top of your deck is totally fine. Like, there's... This is so interesting. We're going to have to see what Pyke actually does, but these cards look good. Like, a lot of the cards today look good. These are, on average, probably the most competitive cards we've seen in this expansion. Is that it? All right. I think that's it for today. Wow. This was crazy. This was really, really crazy. I'm going to need to spend some real time thinking about these. I actually will. My initial impressions. I'll give emote ratings. I'll spend the next hour, like, constructing my emote ratings, and we'll do a whole emote rating thing. Don't worry about it, guys. It's we'll get through it. But for now, I'm just gonna do initial impressions, because these cards are actually hard to evaluate. Overall, this SI card, the Wings and the Wave, this is the one that summons the 2 tokens, first wave and last wing. The card's pretty nuts. I'm very happy to call that, a top Lux emote, or Nick says swoon. Maybe. I mean, it's pretty insane. It might not be like hyper auto include, but it's nuts. Buried in Ice is a hard one to evaluate. I mean, like I said, I think Buried in Ice will likely be pretty powerful. It feels hard for Buried in Ice to not hit decks. Something that will happen with Buried in Ice that's important to understand is that it might not hit decks right away. Think about it like Ruination. Like, Ruination is a really, really powerful card in the game. It's super unique and will change how people have to play the game and how people even have to play decks in certain metas. However, that's not necessarily to say that we can know for sure that, like, Freljord control decks will be jam-fisting in, like, copies of Buried in the Ice right away. It's going to be meta dependent, and it's going to require a specific deck build. So, I mean, I'll call the card really powerful, but keep in mind, it's not just like an auto shove in necessarily. Like, it'll come down to what people are playing, but it'll be a strong thing that exists in the card pool. Ruination isn't in every deck, but it's still really important and unique to the game. Yeah, exactly. And it'll be kind of like that is what I'm thinking. Succumb to the Cold just feels bad, even in Frozen Thrall decks. Monstrous Harpoon feels pretty amazing, but I'm not 100% sure Bilgewater will be able to fit that playstyle. Same with Bone Skewer. Like, these are really high. These are the 2 cards that I'm almost most excited for, because they might end up flopping if they don't have enough support, but Bilgewater has always felt kind of like lackluster in terms of being a cohesive region. Like, for the most part, they have existed off of the back of TF and, like, some kinds of aggro strategies, And they've not really had like too much of their own identity apart from that, right? Like there's nothing tying it all together. And I really like that Bilgewater is getting like more power tools. Like the fact that these two cards are printed, you know, aggressively is really, really, really great. Bone Skewer for deep, Monstrous Harpoon for some Bilgewater control deck. Yeah, exactly. Bone Skewer is fucking amazing. I love this. Thrashing Snapper, super cool for like reputation and overwhelm. At the end of the day, might be a hard time to fit with like the 1 mana cards, but it's like cards that are cheap have a much easier time hitting decks than cards that are expensive, right? You can see this across like every card in the game. Most cards that are expensive have like a hard time seeing experimental slot in. Thrashing Snapper will actually be messed around with for a bit. This is an important card to exist. Like, again, sort of similar to Buried Ice, even if Thrashing Snapper isn't good right away, in certain metas and certain decks, this card will eventually be good and it'll eventually enable things, right? And for that, I really, really like Thrashing Snapper. Like, even if reputation decks aren't good, like, right off the bat, this is an important card to exist in the card pool, because reputation decks need a thing like this. Incisive Tactician is bad. This level of cost you're paying for a rally is just a little too expensive. Adaptation 3000 is impossible to evaluate. I mean, it doesn't look good. It's just a 1 mana 1/3 that can copy keywords. So even if they retroactively give other things tech, I don't see this doing a lot. But this is Adaptation 3000 is kind of a clue that we might see more actual tech synergy. And if that happens, then yeah, I mean, if it's a tech card and it's not bad and there's a reason to run a lot of tech cards, then I don't really hate it. I mean, so this one literally shares keywords, right? Like, so if you use it with Heimer, it'll give all of Heimer turrets all of the keywords. It's like give it all, right? It copies both ways. It's Adaptatron. Oh yeah, why am I saying adaptation? Wait, you're right. It does copy both ways. So if you play like the elusive Heimer turret, and you have a bunch of Heimer turrets, Adaptatron will give all of your Heimer turrets all of the Heimer turret keywords. That's really, really funny, actually. I mean, that should be how it works, because it says we share keywords. Like that, the sharing is happening both ways. I'm pretty sure that's the phrasing. Only on new summon. Yeah. Sorry. On the new summon. Yes, it's not retroactive to things that are already on the board. But when you summon a tech, it shares its keywords with Adaptatron, and Adaptatron shares its keywords with it. This is a really cool card. It's like the Zoe effect. Yeah, well, sort of. It doesn't share it with everything that was already on the board at the time, which the Zoe one does. But that's still really cool. For a 1 mana 1/3, which is honestly not a bad stat line. A 1 mana 1/3 is something that we haven't really seen a lot of in Runeterra before. Like, that's actually a big deal, because on turn 1, being able to just play a 1/3 blocker is really, really, really good against aggro. Runeterra has seen a lot of like 1 mana 0/3s, but those are different, because when you block like a Legion Saboteur with a 1 mana 0/3, it doesn't really do anything. Like, the Saboteur still attacks you next turn, right? This is an important stat line. This is a very, very important stat line, because in a Heimer deck, Adaptatron will say, okay, you know, I can block an aggro card and also survive, so I'm kind of like helpful against aggro, but also I can help blow out opponents on some kind of combo. It's a cool card. It's a really, really cool design. I'm a fan of this one. Chirean Sumpworker. God, I don't know what to think about this card. I mean, so you have to play 2 of them. When you play 2 of them, they both combine into a single posse, right? And then the bonus is, if you have more than the second one, if you have like a third one, or God forbid a fourth one, then those ones are standalone posses. Which is really powerful. Because, you know, I mean, it's a 2 mana 4/2 with this insane attack ability, Circuit Breaker. You're gonna need ways of reliably generating this card over and over again, right? Aphelios. It's a 2 mana card, so you can summon it with Aphelios' weapon as well. Aphelios' weapon. And of course, people are gonna run it with like counterfeit copies. You're not gonna want to run this with cards like counterfeit copies, but cards like Rummage to try to draw into multiple might be good. Overall, Sumpworks Posse, I think, is going to be made or broken depending on whether it can fit into a proper elusive deck. Is I think what I would say. I don't think we're gonna run Aphelios itself. Iterative, yeah, iterative improvement is good with these as well. But the weird thing about iterative is you're wasting the stat buff. because you're losing the yeah, because the second one you play is the one that gets obliterated. No, wait, sorry, I misread it. It's the first one. When you summon another one, it transforms allied ones everywhere into Sumpworks Possess. But you're still gonna lose the stat buff because of how it's worded. Because self transforms persist stat buffs, but other unit transforms don't. It's a weird card. I will say, Chirean Sumpworker isn't a card that you're going to want to build like a full counterfeit copies deck around, but it's a card you're going to want to run as like sometimes a power card in an elusive deck. Like elusive decks will love this card, especially the fact that this deals 1 to the Nexus when it attacks is crazy. So it looks like a really powerful potential card, but it needs PNZ to be able to run the elusive game plan, and it'll fit in there probably for sure. All right. Stalking Shadows and Fading Memories as well. Fading Memories might be the best way to run Sumpworker. Honestly, I like that. I think Shadow Isles has to be the best way to run this. If you're going to try to like build around it for sure. Like Stalking Shadows and Fading Memories have to be the 2 best ways to do this. Because like the transformation... Okay, I will say... There's a very interesting wording thing happening with this. We're going to need confirmation on this. I can't say 100% sure. Transformations are really weird in Legends of Runeterra. In Legends of Runeterra, when your card transforms itself, it keeps the buff. And that's why Concurrent Timelines keeps buffs that were on in the hand or on deploy. When you transform another ally, it removes buffs. That's like Mystifying Magician deletes buffs and completely transforms the buffs. Chirean Sumpworker says... It obliterates me and transforms allied Sumpworkers everywhere into Possess, Posses, which implies that you are losing the buff, but we don't know that for sure. If you're losing any modifiers that the card has, then Fading Memories will be the best way to play this card, because you'll be able to Fading Memories it for 0 mana. The one that gets played first will be the one that gets copied. The one that gets played second is going to be the one that's ephemeral, and then the one that gets played first will obliterate it and transform the second one, and if we can trust Riot wording, that means it'll lose the ephemeral. We don't know that for sure because it's a little inconsistent, but presumably it won't keep buffs, which means Fading Memories and Stalking Shadows will be the best way to use this. If we can go by the wording, that's how it should be, because they'll lose the ephemeral when they transform, in theory. If that's not the case, then yeah, some kind of PNZ elusive deck with iterative. But that Shadow Elves thing has a lot of potential. Cithria, Lady of Clouds. So this one is really expensive. I mean, it's an elite. You're not really going to be able to get value out of like the 10 mana card that doesn't like immediately close the game. You can think of it sort of like Asol, doubles other allies' power and health and grants them Challenger. Is that a grant when it doubles other allies' power and health? I mean, that's a permanent, right? It's not this round. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a really, really powerful card. You can think of it sort of like Asol if you have a board. The biggest problem with Cithria, Lady of Clouds, is you kind of do need to have a board for it to be good. Whereas one of the things that makes Asol really, really important is that Asol is, of course, like, you know, better when you have a board, but you certainly don't need a board for Asol to get value as like, you know, a grindy mirror game closer kind of tech card. For the most part, Cithria, Lady of Clouds, I don't think is going to be good. Like, there's no reason to run it for the elite keyword. If you want like a big late game Demacia bomb, I mean, there's always like Brightsteel Formation, and the difference between turn 9 and turn 10 is a pretty big difference. So I don't see this card making big waves at 10 mana. I wouldn't say so. It's kind of a win more card, a little bit. I mean, there's you want your card to have a good floor of value. Like, even Brightsteel Formation, if you only have like one other unit, is pretty good. Whereas Cithria, Lady of Clouds is all right if you only have one other unit. But I mean, you're not getting like barrier every attack. It just feels like it's not going to be able to like do the same outgrind things that Brightsteel Formation and Asol can do. And then we've got Ardent Tracker, the last card, the first one we saw. When you summon an elite while Ardent Tracker is in your hand, it reduces my cost by 1. So, I mean, it's like Vanguard Squire. You have to reduce it a little bit more, but the payoff is higher. And, of course, it itself is an elite card. This one is interesting. I haven't played enough of the elite archetype to feel comfortable evaluating this. It's a scout with a 5/3, a 3/5. I don't know. I mean, the elite archetype I don't think is going to be super strong anytime soon. Like, this card has a good chance of being able to fit into elite decks, but in terms of like how you're gonna want to run Demacia, you're still not really gonna want to run like the full elite synergy. It's still a cool card in elite decks. All right, that's it. I know that one was long today, man. That was like 30 minutes, but there is so much to talk about these cards. So that's just my initial impressions of these cards. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, check the pinned comment, because I'm going to be discussing this for a few hours, and I'm going to be updating and adjusting my ratings, evaluations, emote ratings of these cards, and like what kinds of decks they're going to be fitting in, right? Man, and I can't wait. There's so much interesting to talk about here. There's so much interesting to talk about. All right, guys. What other combos are you guys seeing? What have I missed?